Appreciate it. Let's see. Are we on here?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Adjust this a little bit. Alrighty. So great to be here with you guys tonight. As Father Matt said, I'm from Denver, Colorado. I met my wife, Caitlin, sitting over here. She's 7 months pregnant with our first, expecting our baby girl in January. Yeah, super excited. Team girl dad. I'm really excited for that. This is a special place for us. She went here for 4 years, and the Newman Center was a huge part of her life. She had actually her conversion here. But the funniest kind of part of it is, so when she came up to visit NAU with her mom, or actually to move in, her mom was like, okay, I'm gonna take you to the Catholic table and get you on the Catholic track and introduce you to Father Matt. So her mom goes over and introduces her to Father Matt, and Caitlin's first words to Father Matt are, "Nice to meet you. I don't really want to be Catholic anymore. I probably won't ever see you again." And her mom is like, "Oh, all right. It could be a little bit more, gracious." So jokes on her. Sneaky Jesus led her here, had her conversion. She ended up becoming an intern. At the time, they had a position called the Newman Board Student President. So she got really involved, and so that's what she gets for being a little rude to Father Matt in the beginning. So I'm really grateful to come and speak with you guys tonight about a topic that I'm really passionate about. Bodies. Bodies are weird. They're weird to talk about in the Catholic space. They're all shapes and sizes. It's not something that we really hear about that much, and especially within the Catholic world. Oftentimes, we might hear about, modesty or vanity or chastity, but a lot of times it's in regards to what we shouldn't do, and a lot of no's, and there's not a lot of what should you do with your body. Is what you do with your body important? Is your body important? Especially in kind of the life of a Catholic in pursuit of holiness, a lot of it's about, the spiritual things that we do. So, it can be strange, and it's just not really something that's focused on. And, a lot of times it's seen for people who are, really niche into that, a gym rat or, a really health-obsessed person who's, a vegan or whatever it may be, somebody who's just really obsessed with their health. And we oftentimes think that those people are just kind of full of themselves, vain, conceited, and there's plenty of people like that within the gym or within the health culture. But for me, what I really am excited to share about is how it's become a different sort of journey for me. But I think the question is, is it important what we do with our bodies? Are our bodies important? A couple interesting statistics. So Apple's total valuation is at $2.6 trillion. Saudi Arabian oil company is valued at $2.2 trillion. Amazon is valued at $1.6 trillion. The wellness and health industry is valued at $4.37 trillion. It's a universal desire. You've never met somebody who doesn't want to be healthy, who doesn't want to look good. It's innate into who we are, and you can see within that. But some other, more unsettling statistics. 29 million Americans live with eating disorders. I work with lots of clients, both men and women, who have eating disorders of all varieties. 70% of people would admit to being dissatisfied with their bodies. I'm sure there's many people in here who would experience that. 65% of bodybuilders, the people that we would think are kind of the poster children for having amazing physiques, 65% of them have eating disorders and body dysmorphia. The number one cause of death in the world overwhelmingly is related to lack of proper nutrition and proper exercise. So, just to kind of go through that, our bodies matter. It's obviously something that people are very interested in, whether they say it or not. And it's obviously something that has a drastic impact on an exponential amount of people. So they matter. So typically, like I said, when we think of people who think of their health or health conscious, we think that they're sort of conceited. And I want to share more of my story into how it's become a different path, and how really this path has become a path to virtue, a path to holiness, and ultimately a path to freedom. So as Father mentioned, right after high school, I actually went to seminary. I was studying to become a Catholic priest. And that's actually where I started my kind of fitness journey. A weird place to start when you go to seminary. You're like, dude, shouldn't you be focusing on studying for the priesthood? I was, but I was also trying to get jacked. And I was like, well, let's do both. What's nothing better than a jacked priest? So I started there. The university that I was at, University of St. Thomas, had a really nice weight facility, and so I was like, we pray a lot, we study a lot. I'm going to start to work out. Well, backtracking a little bit, my entire life, I was the smallest kid in my school, every grade of every year. My freshman year of high school, I was 81 pounds. I was 4 feet 11. I was essentially a hobbit with less hairy feet. I didn't break 100 pounds until my junior year of high school. I was an extremely small person. So I got to seminary. We had a really nice weight room. And so I figured, I'm just going to start onto this journey and see what happens. And what I didn't realize at the time is that yes, on the surface, I wanted to kind of change my physique and develop muscles or whatever. But what I really was looking for underneath, instinctively, was I was really trying to find healing for my own trauma. And I was trying to compensate for things that I had been through in my life. I was really kind of seeking attention and looking for medication for wounds that I had experienced in my life. So to backtrack, my dad was an ex-Navy SEAL. My mom was a successful actress in New York. Both of them were kind of overtaken by drugs and alcohol separately, ended up homeless, sobered up, met each other, and this was like the home that I was raised in. A lot of dysfunction, a lot of control, manipulation, abuse. My dad was just a very manipulative person, a very abusive person, and he carried a lot of his own wounds and kind of took that out on the family. And that's kind of what I was raised in. My dad, during high school, went to jail 2 times, one for domestic violence, another time for a DUI. My mom had cancer 3 times throughout my life. She was basically on her deathbed my entire high school experience. She had a brain tumor, wasn't supposed to live, and so my life just had a lot of trauma built into it. And so it was really from a place of brokenness that I was trying to sort of rebuild myself, looking for affirmation, looking for attention. And I thought, if I start working out and changing my body, it's going to start to fulfill me in those ways. So I would have never admitted it at the time, but really deep down, I wanted to be noticed. I wanted to be loved. I wanted to receive attention. And we all do that in different ways, whether it's social media, our careers, whether it's sex, whether it's the way we present ourselves, fashion, the way we talk. There's so many different things that we all kind of do in order to try to just take care of ourselves and make ourselves feel better for things that we've gone through. The beautiful thing is that as I began to really dive into this experience of health and fitness, my recreation really started to become a recreation. So what do I mean by that? Well, it'd be a talk for another time to go into the historicity of the Bible and how it's unbelievably believable, and how it's not something that a human could create by themselves. I could spend so much time on that. But through the inspired Word of God, we hear in the beginning about creation. Now, whether or not Genesis is meant to be taken literally or figuratively, there's a really important message that is to be seen through this creation story. It's a profound reality that when God made man and woman, before the fall, before evil, before corruption, we were, which we still are, a composite of our soul and our body, a union. Our body being the matter that we're made of, the things that you can touch. Our soul being the unique animating force that gives your body life. Our body and soul have always been unified, and they interact with each other. You can't affect one without the other. Simple ways to see that would be something like stress. Stress is an inanimate object that we experience externally. You can't quantify stress necessarily, but it can really influence our physical. It can make you break out in acne. It can make people's hair gray. It can cause, upset stomachs. So something inanimate affects our physiology. There's a unique, relationship and dynamic between the body and the soul. So the key difference in this relationship that our body and soul had before the fall is that before the fall, our body was subordinate to our soul. What I mean by that is what our soul desired, our body would have gone along with that. It would have complemented that. What our body desired would have been ordered, and it would have been within the right kind of realm of our relationships with not only ourselves, with others, and with God. So these 3 important relationships are kind of what I want to key in on. Is that before the fall, we had peace. We had inner peace. We had peace with ourselves. We had peace with our neighbor. We had peace with God. And our appetites were ordered. Appetites not meaning, being hungry, coming in here before dinner, but appetite, the philosophical, theological meaning of our human desires. Our human desires were ordered. So, we wouldn't have binged on an entire pizza. We wouldn't have eaten an entire tub of ice cream in one sitting. We wouldn't have wanted to use women for our own pleasure and satisfaction. We wouldn't have looked in a reflection in the Garden of Eden pond and thought, man, I wish my waist was smaller and my butt was bigger. We wouldn't have thought about God's plan or providence or love as something burdensome or boring. We would have naturally desired these things and had natural inclinations and had peace and harmony within these relationships. Well, what ultimately happened wasn't just Adam and Eve eating an apple. It was truly disobedience to God, and it was a disharmony of these relationships of ourself, of our neighbor, and our relationship with God. So, although yes, death was part of kind of the ramification of that, it wasn't just death, it was death to those those relationships that were in union, that peace, that inner peace that we experienced. So, now we eat and drink in excess. In some cases, in eating disorders, we don't eat enough. We feel lazy. We don't want to exercise. We don't want to take care of our bodies. We binge on social media. We watch porn. We use and abuse drugs and alcohol, which, damages our relationships with ourselves. Also, we use other people for self-satisfaction. We use them for our own means, for our own pleasure. We elicit attention from others and try to manipulate others to get them to give us attention. We hide things, we lie, we cheat, we steal, all of these things affecting our relationships with other people. With God, we don't want to pray. We don't want to follow the commandments of God. We think that the rules of the church are just these things created by these old white men to just suppress us and oppress us. And we don't see the love of God as something that's loving, but something that's, restrictive for us. And sometimes we don't even believe in God. These things damaging our relationship with God. So the fall of creation, again, wasn't just about eating an apple. It was about a disintegration of who we are as human beings. Our soul and our body, the integration, our body began to rebel against our soul. So now going back to my story, what I realized was that my recreation, as I mentioned, began to be a recreation, a reordering, a reharmonization, a reintroduction of this peace that we were created for. So the relationship with myself, as I began to grow in self-control, forcing myself or learning proper nutrition, forcing myself to do a workout, push through reps that were painful, go for a run, and not giving up when my muscles wanted to when I was out of breath. When I was beginning to learn discipline and what was good for my body, and I stopped eating junk food all the time, I realized, these things weren't good for me. Not only that, but I started to operate better as a human being. Studies have shown that when doing standardized tests for young kids, where the only variable is difference of nutrition quality, the kids who had a well-balanced, healthy nutrition had exponentially higher test scores, better memory, faster cognitive ability, etc. So I began to temper my desire to give up when things were painful, and I began to introduce things into my life that were reordering that harmony, that inner peace that I was meant for. So I didn't want to abuse alcohol, knowing that, number one, it was toxic for me, but number two, it also limited my ability to grow muscle, trying to be a jacked priest at the time. In other words, all of these things, I began to live a properly ordered relationship with myself. I realized that as I began to take self-control in my body, it was leading to more self-control in my soul. As I began self-discipline, I realized that self-discipline for the sake of me ends up leaving me with a clean bed, a healthy lunch, a nice-looking bicep, but it kind of ends there. It's just all me. It's just all self-centered. And what I realized is that self-discipline, when perfected, should be for the sake of self-gift. Self-mastery leads to self-gift. So, not using my strength or my physique to use and abuse others, but rather to serve and to protect others. I realized that it was in giving that I received. It was in the sincere gift of myself that I began to find myself. If you go to a gym and look around, it won't take long to see the way that guys look at girls, and when they walk by, they look at their butt like a nice Ferrari driving by. For me, it was a reordering of my own desires, and it was beginning to break free of those things and take custody of my eyes, not looking at other people as objects to be used, but as somebody to respect and to serve in their dignity. So it was beginning to heal that relationship with others. I would jump at the chance to help an older person carry something because I knew I was able and effective. The temptation to battle with pornography became easier because I was becoming accustomed to denying my passions within my physical realm, which naturally carried over into denying my passions in other areas. My relationships with others was being restored. Lastly, I would sleep more soundly. I would wake up with more energy, with eagerness to pray. In seminary, we had to be in the chapel at 6:30 every single day. I was sleeping better as I began to live a healthier life, began to exercise more. I was more attentive in prayer. I began to see God's commands not as burdens or oppressive, but rather wisdom in how I was created and to live a life that was free and full. I realized the church's teachings were not some outdated rules with no understanding of our modern lives, but actually I was realizing the transforming power of pain and suffering and the wisdom that the church had to offer in that. So how tempering my appetite began to lead to true freedom, because that's the way I was created, I began to also see how that relationship with God was beginning to be restored. I was working as a better human. I began to and want to worship God more. I realized that my body wasn't just meant for worshiping myself, that having a nice physique wasn't just meant for obtaining attention from others to be my own idol, but rather that the gift that God gave me within my body was ultimately a gift, and that giving Him due worship and honor was really what I was made to do, and that doing that in my body was a way to glorify and honor Him. Wow, that's a lot to realize from working out. You're like, did you really figure all of that out from working out? You're like, there's no way. Well, okay, it took a lot of time, obviously. It's been years down the road, and it wasn't just like at the time I'm in seminary and I'm just like working out and at that time I was like 105 pounds, so I had made massive gains since my freshman year. I was still trying to progress, but yeah, of course I didn't learn all of that at that time. But, it was little by little over the years. But even that, it wasn't perfect. So, one example of this was my own experience with physique competitions. So I've done several physique competitions in Denver. It's a very weird sport if you've never seen it. It's like a bunch of, you imagine like Arnold Schwarzenegger, there's different levels of physique. I did men's physique, so you basically like wear board shorts. It's like a beach body type thing. You get these super dark spray tans that look absolutely ridiculous. You look like a bunch of piece of beef jerkies like walking around. And then there's like judges there, and you like do poses, and they tell you if you look better than the guy next to you. But you all look really good, but then like guys get sad. Like these really muscular guys are like, man, I didn't win a trophy. And it's like, dude, you look really good still, but you do still like look like beef jerky. So it's just a really weird sport. So I did one in 2017. It's a lot of work. It's one of the hardest things I've ever done. So much discipline and sacrifice to get to the levels of like body fat that you have to get for a stage-ready physique. I got absolutely destroyed in my first competition, which was really humiliating because typically it's like all of these people who are all the best looking at their gyms like do these competitions. So you've like thought you were really good looking. Everyone's like, wow, you're doing great. Like you look awesome. And you get with all those other people, it's kind of like high school athletes going to college. You're like, you were the best at high school, and now you're like mediocre if you even like were able to play in college. So it's kind of like that, really humbling. So I decided, okay, I'm going to take some time off, try to grow, come back at this. So I was like, all right, I'm going to just go big. Picked the biggest competition that Colorado had to offer a few years back. It was the Mr. Rocky Mountain. And got a new coach. I started my prep at 180 pounds. I bulked up to 216 pounds. That's a lot of weight on this frame. I was looking like Winnie the Pooh. And I was not, it was for another time, but I was eating 6,000 calories a day. It was very hard. And then from end of August until November, I dropped 60 pounds. And on stage, I was 156 pounds, coming from 216 pounds. I skin caliper test at 3.3 body fat percentage. It's not healthy for you. It's a really unhealthy sport, actually. So the way they do it is kind of like swimming or track, where they have different heats, kind of. So they do it by height. So I was obviously with the tallest guys. The guys 6'5" and above. So there was 6 different height classes. I you have to win your own height class, and you compete against the other winners of the other height classes. So my height class was really, the show was just really stacked. It was a huge show that year, and I was like, wow, why did I pick this show? This is going to be another humiliating experience of a bunch of guys who look like beef jerky, but these guys look like a lot better beef jerky than I do. So I ended up winning my height class, which I was surprised about because one of my teammates was also in that class. He was supposed to be in the B class, and he didn't measure properly. I'm like, dude, you couldn't have stood a little bit taller, but that's really my issue. And so I won that class. Then I get to compete against all the guys in the other height classes, so the guys who are actually massive. So all of us are up there. It's now there's only 6 of us out of all of the other people who have already lost. And they make this really big dramatic thing, and they're like, the Mr. Rocky Mountain, there can only be one winner, and it's really dramatic. And she's like, and the winner tonight is Dakota Lane. And I was like, whoa, I just won the whole thing. That's crazy. And I walked out there, and I was like, I don't know what you do when you like the sign of the cross, like Macarena. But it was amazing. So I got to the point where I thought I made it. Well, it was the weirdest thing, that later on that night, the next day I had hundreds of messages on Instagram and text messages and congratulations and all these things, and it was wow, you look amazing and so cool, right? You'd think, wow, you made it. I got home later and I went to Cancun the next day, and I was on the beach the next day and I literally just broke down crying. It was one of the most empty experiences of my entire life. I just felt empty. I was up there, I did this whole prep for all these months to get up there and stand next to these guys. And don't get me wrong, it was really cool. I felt proud of myself, and coming from where I did, it was awesome to do that. But I was I have a better body than other guys. Okay, that's cool. I got a big trophy for it. That's cool. But it was a really empty feeling. And I just share that experience to say that even though I had been through years and years of this journey where I knew that I was reordering and recreating myself, that I was trying to bring about a new kind of freedom within myself, I was still tempted to make my body my idol. I was still tempted to let things of the world become my peace, become my satisfaction. And again, it just left me just sitting there empty, crying. So, even though my realizations and my recreation was a process, we're constantly tempted all the time throughout our journey, throughout our life. It's not a one and done. You don't just learn something. I'm not going to be able to give you a talk and you're going to come out of this and be a saint. It's a lifelong process of reordering our desires, recreating these relationships, this inner peace, this peace with our body that has been lost. So where does this all leave us then? If you were to ask me, okay, Dakota, that's all great. So what's your deep desire for me? Do you want me to be a gym rat? Do you want me to work out 6 times a week for 2 hours a day? Do you want me to eat nothing but chicken, rice, and broccoli? No, I don't want that for you guys. There's certain people that's for, and that's definitely not for everybody, and that's not even what health is. My desire for you is ultimately to have peace with your body, to have peace within yourself, to have peace with your relationship with yourself, with your neighbors, with God. Well-rounded integration, living a life full according to how you were made in your human experience. This still means celebrating holidays. It still means going out for drinks with friends. It still means having rest and relaxation. These are all human experiences. And yes, health is an important thing. We don't want to abuse our health, but it's not the end-all, be-all. You can't take your flesh with you. All good human things, but it also means learning temperance. It means eating to nourish your body, learning to train your body, not because you necessarily want to, win a physique competition, because it's the way that God made our bodies and being a good steward of your body. As St. Paul says, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing. And that's one of the things I learned when I was working out, is that working out didn't just become, something where I just do this and begin to look better and better. I really began to enter into my workouts as prayers. I thought, why can people write books and dedicate them to people, or run a marathon and dedicate it for their aunts, or make a movie and dedicate it for somebody? Why can't I dedicate each of my workouts and the little bit of pain that I experience? Why can't I dedicate that for somebody else? Why can't I offer that as a prayer for somebody else who, and pray for them? I pray that I have the strength today to push through this, so that that person has the strength to push through the abuse that they're going through, whatever it may be. I began to really put more intention into what I was doing. So there's 3 quick points that I just kind of want to give to you about having peace with your body. The first is that it's dependent upon your ability to control yourself. What I mean by that is, a lot of times we think that boundaries, we think that church rules or how you're supposed to live your life, again, like I mentioned, are oppressive and they're meant to restrict you. But if you think about sports, the boundary in basketball, you don't ever hear, a basketball player complaining to the referee of like, why can't I just step outside of the boundary? Well, no, the boundaries give freedom to play the game. If there was no boundaries, you wouldn't be able to play the sports themselves. So nobody focuses on like, man, these boundaries, they're still looking the same as last season, like really limiting boundaries in this basketball court. Like, no, you understand the boundaries are there and they're a given, but they give freedom to play the game. It's the same thing with life. Yes, there's boundaries, and there's a lot of things that we naturally just assume. It's not okay to kill somebody. It's not okay to steal things. And then there's other things that we're like, well, that's a little bit of oppressive. Like, that should be more of my right. That should be more of my thing. Well, it's not meant to oppress you. It's because there's a way you were created, and there's things that in your creation, if you live according to it, you're going to live freely and fully. So that's the first thing. It's dependent upon your ability to control yourself. People who don't have control over themselves, they don't have peace with their body. I work with a lot of clients with eating disorders, both anorexia, severe body dysmorphia, bulimia, food addictions. And, I have people who look phenomenal. You would have absolutely no idea that they have eating disorders. Like I said, 65% of bodybuilders have eating disorders. You'd have no idea. And I've met some of the most phenomenally looking people who are the most internally enslaved people. They have no peace with their body. The ability to control yourself liberates you to have peace with your body. The second thing is realizing that it's not all about your body. The experience of my competition was really an experience of that the peace with your body, you're not going to just work out yourself to a certain point where you think, I made it. It's a never-ending pursuit. You'll be like a hamster on a wheel. And I see this with my clients who come to me and they're like, all right, I want to look like this, and I can tell they have this deep desire that they think, once I achieve this certain look, then I'm going to be satisfied. Once my waist looks, a certain way and my proportions and blah, 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 then I'll be happy. And it doesn't happen. Whatever pursuit you're going to pursue in the world, it's not going to satisfy you. It doesn't matter if it's money. It doesn't matter if it's fame, sex, popularity. It won't leave you satisfied because you're constantly trying to fit a square shape into a circle hole. It's just not going to fill it. So realizing it's not all about your body. It's about more than that. The third thing is realizing how you are made and what you are made for. As I mentioned, yes, it's important to take care of who we are, and I would, argue that with all of you. It shouldn't just be something for people who like to go to the gym, and again, I'm not saying you have to go to the gym 6 days a week. There's other ways to live an integrated life in your body. But those things are great, but it's not the end-all, be-all. Jesus didn't say, when you come to the heavenly gates, I'm going to test your body fat percentage. I'm going to ask you how many calories you ate throughout the week. No, that's not what we're going to be judged on. We're going to be judged on how did you love. That's really what it comes down to. But what we do in our body, the greatest commandment, love God above all else and love your neighbor as yourself. Love of neighbor is predicated on your ability to love yourself. How can you love other people without first loving yourself? So, yes, it's important to take care of who you are, but it's not the end-all, be-all. So realizing who you are and what you're made for, the 3 things. So, yes, we have a place in this process of recreation. It is our decisions. It is things that we decide to do. But ultimately, it's through our cooperation with grace. God initiates this always. And it can be easy to think, and I'm not here to tell you that your path to holiness is going to be dependent upon how well you take care of your body. But I am here to say that your path to holiness can be impacted by how you choose to or choose not to take care of your body. But how we cooperate with God's initiation with us and with the gifts that He gave us in our body, ultimately, like as I mentioned, begin with him coming to us first. In 1988, in Armenia, there was an 8.2 magnitude earthquake. Within 4 minutes, it killed 30,000 people. 9/11 killed not even 3,000. A horrible tragedy 9/11 was, but 30,000 people in 4 minutes, this earthquake. There was this father, he had a son, his name was Armand. He told his son, he made a promise to him, and he said, Armand, as a kid, no matter what happens, I'll always be there for you. Well, this earthquake happens, the father's at work, so he gets in his car, driving throughout the destroyed city to get to the school. He gets to the school is completely flattened. He's like, oh my gosh, I have to, find the area of the school where my son would be. So he's running around, obviously parents are there, it's just mass hysteria. Gets to the spot of where the school is flattened, and he starts digging. There's no signs of life at all. He's digging through the rubble, pulling rocks off, pulling concrete. Obviously, all of these parents are swarming to this place. An hour goes by. 2 hours goes by. They're digging and digging. 4 hours goes by. Eventually, parents are like, there's no way. This is a massive school that was completely flattened. He keeps digging. 6 hours goes by. Obviously, the police are there. Other parents, people start bringing flowers, making it a memorial. 8 hours, 10 hours goes by. His hands are bleeding at this point from pulling the concrete up. 15 hours, 20 hours goes by. He is not giving up. People are like, hey man, I know this is horrible. I know this is a tragedy. We have to give this up. 25 hours, he's not giving up. He's just so locked in. 30 hours goes by. A whole day, a day and night goes by that he's just continually looking for his son because he thought, I made a promise to my son that I'm always going to be there for you. And he said, I can't give up. How does a father reconcile that? 36 hours goes by. He pulls up a piece of rubble. He's just completely exhausted and defeated at this point. He pulls up a massive piece of rubble and he looks down, and looking up at him, he sees his son. He says, Daddy! 36 hours later. Not only that, but Armand turns around to a couple dozen people who are trapped within this area with him, and he says, I told you my dad would come for us. You see, this is the same relationship that we have with our Father. He is always pursuing you. It doesn't matter the things in your life that are blocking you out. It doesn't matter if you've been abused. It doesn't matter if you struggle with eating disorders. It doesn't matter what you've done. He's made a promise to you. He's not going to give up. And this is the reality. And just to highlight that yes, it's important, the decisions that we make. What did Armand do in that? He simply stayed faithful. He kept hope. Sometimes that's all we can do is stay faithful and keep hope. But the reality is we do have a God who's constantly pursuing us, that will dig through any amount of trouble and will never give up to come find us. So the gift of all of this, the truth in all of this is that it's through my life and the abuse that I experienced and my journey through fitness and health that, yes, I began to experience more peace and more freedom. Ultimately, I began to experience more love myself, more love of my neighbor, and more love of God. And that's my hope for all of you. Thank you. So I don't know if anyone has any questions. I'm always happy to answer any questions. Q&A, fitness.
Questions, just repeat the question maybe. And then,
Cool. Fitness questions, nutrition questions, theology questions. Any other questions? All right, we got one here.
What do you do to cut through all the garbage? You know what I mean? Like with nutrition, with like how do you,
Yeah, no, it's a great question. There's a lot. Is my mic still working?
Yeah.
Yeah? No? I don't think so.
Keep the question.
we'll get you some batteries.
Oh, it's fine. You can hear me. If anyone can't hear me, can you guys hear me in the back? Okay. So she asked, how do you kind of cut through all the BS of fitness, nutrition, especially nowadays? It's interesting, in the gym now, it's trendy to work out. When I was in high school, it wasn't trendy to work out. but it was just for athletes. Now it's like, it's the cool thing to do. TikTok, Instagram, it's all over. There's all these new diets, intermittent fasting, paleo, ketogenic. What's like the truth? It's a good question. I wish there was like a Bible that I could give you. I'm working on like writing a book with another coach that's just going to be like a Catholic fundamentals to nutrition and fitness. But yeah, getting a coach, like in life, when we look at how do we want to, you know, be the best at what we are going to be at something, you look at great athletes. Let's take that for example. Michael Jordan had a coach. Was it because he was inadequate as a basketball player? No, it's because he wanted to be the best at what he was doing. So it's looking at people who are doing, who have achieved or who have the knowledge of what you want. You know, that's what I would always say is, you know, outsourcing, but even that can be tough. So finding people that you trust who are living a life that you want, you know, to live, who can teach you that. But I mean, there's a lot of good information online. It's just like you said, you kind of have to sift through it. I will tell you that, you know, most of these marketing companies, their main objective is your dollar, and it's not going to be your health. So if anything comes across as like, this is easier than what's been given before, if there's anything that's like, this is going to be quicker than what's been given before, this newfound thing that's, you know, more efficient. No, there's nothing new under the sun when it comes to our bodies. Our bodies were made a certain way. There's things that work for our bodies that will always work for our bodies because it's the way we were created. So the answer is usually going to be the longer, harder process. If it's a shorter, easier process, they're probably not the one that you're going to want. So yeah, research continues to develop, and there's ways to be more efficient. But yeah, the best thing I can give you, like short answer, is find somebody who can like help you on that path to just like help kind of cut through that. Until I write a book, I guess, that can do that for you. Plug for a book that's not even like written yet.
You can keep taking questions.
Yeah.
How do you like outgrow vanity when you're starting to make your workouts into a prayer and your fasting?
That's a great question. I love that question because in my own journey, I got a lot of pushback and criticism, especially in the Catholic world, of like, Dakota's gone off the deep end. Like he's just really vain now and like posting pictures of himself and like, he's a lost cause. Oh, there we go. And so, yeah, in the Catholic world, I think a lot of times what we can tend to do is throw the baby out with the bathwater, meaning that at the risk of being vain, we're like, you can't be really into your health and fitness because you might be vain. And I get that question all the time. And the interesting thing is I usually get it from people who are really not healthy. And they're like, oh, well, how do you deal with vanity? I'm like, how do you deal with your doctor's appointments when you get your blood work back, dude? Like, I don't mean to be rude, but it's true. So how do you process through the vanity? It's really organic. It's day by day. Again, it's not like I woke up one day. It was like 7 years into my experience that I had the competition experience where I was like, you know, falling back into it and like kind of subconsciously being like, oh, my body's going to make me happy. So it's a really organic thing. It's an internal check. There's nothing external really about it that you can look at somebody and be like, oh, that person's vain, because you don't know what's going on inside of their heart. A lot of people who present themselves, you know, in the best ways are usually compensating for something. So how do we process through vanity? You have to be really honest and take a really good, honest look at yourself in your heart and see, why am I doing this? But again, at the risk of just throwing it all away, because if you're like, oh, well, I am doing this for attention, which I was, and there still is times where, of course, I still want to look good, and it's nice to have somebody, walk up to me on the beach and want to take a picture like that. It feels cool, but that doesn't, that's not what I'm getting. That's not that's not what makes me wake up in the morning. So I guess there's not an easy answer, but it really comes down to just being really in tune with your own intentions. And it's really subtle how it happens, but I still struggle with it nowadays. Like at the gym, it's still difficult not to want to walk around and, be like super puffed up and proud with how you look and stuff. As a girl, there's just so much social pressure for the way you should look, the way you should present yourself, the way you should dress or not dress. Like, it's just a very tough world that you guys live in, especially with social media. And so it can be easy to kind of fall into that, but it's like you don't want to be vain, but you still want to present yourself and be pretty and not dressed in like a potato sack. So you're like, how do I balance this? Like, yeah, it's really, like I said, it really comes to the internal disposition of your heart. So for me, a lot of it's prayer. Like, I offer all of my workouts as prayers for other people, which helps me to take the attention off myself and put it onto somebody else. So it's like I'm using this time. Yes, I'm doing it intentionally to make myself better and feel better and more healthy, but I want to make this about somebody else. So that's just one small way that I try to combat that. Yeah, in the back.
As a bodybuilder at your level, what did you do to fight off the temptation to use steroids and other anabolics to kind of increase yourself?
That's a great question. And I love that question. In my competition, on the amateur level, even nowadays, like steroids are rampant. So I know that out of the 6 overall guys that were competing in that show, I know 4 of them were enhanced, and it's very common. For me, it was one of those things where, in the same way that like cheating in school, for me, just like became unattractive because I wanted to earn it. I wanted to put myself to the test and like work hard. It was similar to that in that like I wanted my self-discipline to be the proof itself. So I still have guys who come up to me in the gym and ask me, number one, if I sell steroids or what I use for steroids or like what kinds. And I'll tell them like, no, I don't. And they're like, you don't have to lie to me, man. Like you can tell me. And I'm like, I really don't. And they don't believe me. And I take that as a compliment. But yeah, how do you avoid the temptation? No, I really do. It's like they're basically saying like what you've achieved naturally is unnatural. Like you can't do that naturally. I'm like, thanks, I did. But yeah, how do you avoid that temptation? It's tough. It really comes down to, again, I think her question of like, you have to really look inside. What are you doing this for? Because I've achieved what I've achieved naturally, and I'm proud of that. And a lot of, most people would look at that and be like, oh yeah, I'd be satisfied with that. But a lot of people want to discredit you also. So you'll look at, especially with social media, like I said, social media is just like so hard now. If I were to start my fitness journey now, it would be 10 times harder because you'll go on Instagram or TikTok and like within 2 minutes, you see like 40 people who just look amazing. And you're like, there's no hope for me. Like these people are everywhere. Everybody's like looks amazing. But then if you actually like if you don't get on social media, like go walk around the mall and you like look at normal people, you're like, wait, that's not real. Like that's not what normal people look like. People aren't just like walking around looking like aesthetic, like Greek statues and whatnot. Like it's not normal. So it really is a lot of temptation and pressure, but it's like a bottleneck. Like of the pressure, it really is an illusion that makes you think like you have to be doing these things to achieve these things when in actuality you don't. So that's not really a specific answer. How did I avoid it? I just never wanted to because I knew for me it would take away some credibility and it would take away some credit of myself. Not to other people because they still don't believe me, but to myself. That I'm like, I achieved what I've achieved through hard work, persistence, and dedication, and I didn't, take that route. You still have to work hard doing that, but that for me. And then there's a lot of other side effects, like I wanted to have a family, and it really impacts, and it really affects your fertility, it affects your health, your hormones, like a lot of things. So, yeah, I don't answer your questions, but yeah, go ahead.
How would you advise, like you're saying, like being confident with what you work for? I love things about like modesty and stuff like that. How would you advise, or I don't know how to ask this, but how would you deal with that? Or I don't know if you'd answer women for that sort of thing, like bathing suits or whatever, being part of what you work for.
Yeah, it's a tough question, and I don't think there's a right or wrong answer with it. I think the question of modesty can take a lot of different, I think, if we got a panel up here of really solid Catholics and you ask them the same question, I think you would get five different answers that would all be valid. I think that the balance and the blend, again, kind of goes back to the vanity question of on the one hand, just because your intentions are right doesn't mean you want to be walking around just flashing everybody look at me, oh, no, I'm praying, I'm looking good, but I'm still praying good. You don't want to be that way. But you also don't want to be to the point where you're I can't wear anything that's form-fitting or going to show anything because that's going to give a temptation for other people. So there's kind of that fine balance. And yeah, I don't know. I don't really know there's not a black and white answer for some of these things like that because when it comes to moral issues, it's a morally neutral thing. The human body is a beautiful thing. And the strange thing is, let's take the naked body, for example. You look in Rome, and in a lot of the churches or museums, there's naked statues. You don't go there looking at those and you're ooh, look at that, woo, like Michelangelo is heating me up. Like, no, because it's in a different context. Whereas, like, you could have the same person, you know, in pornography, and people look at that, and it, like, leads you to sin. So it's the same thing, a naked body, leading you to two different things. One of them leads you to, like, wow, that is beautiful. Like, the fact that Michelangelo could create that, the gift of the human body, like, and I think that's where a lot of Catholics can go wrong, is we're like, at the risk of immodesty and vanity, like, no nakedness. Your body's bad. And that's like what a lot of Catholics get, is like, your body is bad. And it's like, no, our bodies are made by God. Your body is beautiful. Like, your body is so good. And it should be good, and it should be like, it should be something that you want to show off in the right context. I have clients who come to me and they're like, I want to prepare myself for my wedding day and like get in shape for my wedding. I'm like, that's awesome, because, you know, like, look good naked, that's awesome, because your wedding day, you're giving the gift of yourself. So in the same way that you like want to have a good career to be able to support your family, you don't want to be like a drug addict or gambling addict because you don't want to be a liability to your family. Like, you want to be a good person. In the same way, all those things, like, make your body super awesome, so the gift of your body that you're giving to your spouse is awesome. So in that context, it's like the gift of your body, nakedness, is a beautiful thing. So there's no like clear answer on it, because it really comes down to the context of it. So if somebody walked in here, even in a one-piece bathing suit, we'd be like, whoa, what are you doing? Like, this is Newman night. It's freezing outside. Why are you wearing a bathing suit? And like, that's kind of immodest. But like on a beach, one piece is like, wow, you're really modest compared to all these people. So context kind of gives way and insight into those types of things. So I know that doesn't give you a clear answer. I wish I had a better answer. Again, like, judge your inside. Like, why am I wearing this? Am I wearing this because I want people to look at me and be like, wow, look at that person, you know, for the sake of your own satisfaction, as opposed to like, there's dresses that a girl could wear that are super beautiful, or there's ways that a guy could dress that are super handsome, and you're like, yeah, people are going to notice that. But it's not eliciting like a selfish use desire to them, if that makes sense. So, I don't know. Yeah, question again.
When you started like working out and all that stuff, like what helped you develop that discipline, like spiritually? Like, did you ask for anyone's intercession, or like, I don't know, what other things?
Yeah, I mean, at the time, like I said, I was in seminary, so we were doing a lot of like spiritual formation. And so, yeah, like intercession. I mean, I've always loved John Paul II and like the theology of the body, kind of like I was talking about. But how did I develop that discipline? Like, for me, it was really learning again that like what I'm doing in making these decisions is making me the best person that I can be. I'm a very competitive person, so I was like, I want to be the best at what I'm doing, no matter what I'm doing. But the discipline, yeah, it's really difficult. And like a lot of my coaching, like I'll write meal plans and write workout programs, but most of my coaching is like, okay, how do you implement this? Because it's like, yeah, I know you told me to eat this, Dakota. I don't want to eat that. I want to eat this. I know you told me to go to the gym. I don't want to go to the gym. I want to like sit on the couch. So it's like implementing those practices. There's a lot of like, there's a whole, you know, so much I could go into it with it, but I think it's just reminding yourself that the short-term sacrifice is leading to a longer-term gain. And that's really what it comes down to with discipline. And there's a lot of things we do in that, like in college or studying for a test. You're like, yeah, I could be partying, I could be hanging out with friends. Like, why am I studying for this test? Because I'm doing the short-term sacrifice, which is going to lead to like me passing my test, passing my class, getting a job, providing for my family. So it's like a short-term sacrifice for a long-term goal. So I'm like, I'm going to work out, I'm going to train my body, I'm going to eat well, because this short-term sacrifice is going to be better for me later on. So many things like that in life. I think your guys' generation, even mine, like, we're not good at discipline. We're not good at self-sacrifice. We're very selfish. And it's just, discipline is just like lacking. I see that all over. It's just like one of the most lacking traits. But if you can learn that, even like the simplest ways, like, like Navy SEAL, I think David Goggins will talk about, like, just make your bed in the morning. Like, make that first win in your day as like, oh, I don't want to make my bed. It's like the first thing you do, make your bed, is going to like kind of set the pace for the rest of your day. So little things like that. It's like throwing a piece of trash away. You like throw your gum in the trash and you like miss and you're like, oh, it fell on the floor. Like, oh, somebody will get it. Like, no, don't just walk away. Like, you have two legs at work, go back and get it, pick it up. Little things with great love. Just like for me, train myself. And for me, it's like for my family, there's going to be a lot of times where it's like I have to sacrifice myself. So all of those times where I learn to put my own desires aside for something greater, they naturally translate into something more important. So, other questions? Yeah?
Do you think that there is a correlation between like the inner peace, like spiritually,
trusting your fitness process, whether you're like into cutting or bulking or sitting at the units, like trusting the process.
So do you mean like the relationship between did my inner peace change based off of what like process of working out I was doing?
Yeah, or just like where you were in your fitness journey, and things that was affected by like this, like your spirituality at that moment.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, I mean, it's always something that, like, being a good Catholic, Christian, whatever, doesn't mean that you do all of these things, like, all of these Catholic things. It just means that you're doing things as a human in a good Christian Catholic way. So it's like, I never liked Catholic fitness where it's like you have to do a rosary workout. It's like those are cool. Like do a rosary workout for sure if that's like going to help you with your spirituality. But a lot of times you get watered down fitness. It's like not a good workout, and you get watered down faith. You're like praying a distracted rosary. So it's like you're not getting very good of both. So it's like you don't need to do a rosary workout to do a good workout or what. Just like do a really good workout. Make an intention, do it intentionally. When you're praying, pray really well, be authentic, be intentional. So for me, it's like, it's not necessarily brought the whole world down. It's not necessarily about like doing things in a Catholic way. It's doing things as a Catholic for me, if that makes sense. Like who I am influences all of those areas. So like my inner peace can usually get kind of stolen or change. Like it's not necessarily the external things that are happening, it's kind of what's happening internally. Like I could still be consistently working out, and I could, all of a sudden just like be getting tempted more and more towards like wanting that attention from people. And it's like, I still might look the same on the external. My disciplines are the same, cutting or bulking, whatever. So yeah, I don't really know a good answer to that. Like I will say when I am cutting versus bulking, like there's a lot of different components that come with that. My wife can tell you, like, when I'm cutting, the ironic thing is like usually people who look more amazing are way more self-conscious. Like when I'm cutting and I look really good, we just went on vacation. We went on a baby moon to Cancun, and I was like cutting for that. And it's like, oh, I want to look good on the beach. And like, I like become a lot more self-conscious. So it's like I'm looking a lot better and becoming a lot more self-conscious. It's a weird oxymoron. And then bulking, there's different mental battles. Competing really jacked up my own mental space, like body dysmorphia I had like forever. Like I was terrified of carbs, and which a lot of people are. Like it's a real thing. Like I would go to the store and like look at nutrition labels and be like, 5 carbs, like no thank you. So like seriously, I was like afraid of it because it's like when I was cutting, it was just so extreme. So different phases of different people's lives, different seasons are going to change. But again, it just comes back to that common theme of like, look within yourself where your self-intention is. And that's why prayer is so important. Like we're just recognizing where that inner peace is. Because the externals you can do 2 things at the same time and have a totally different disposition. So maybe one more question. Yeah.
I'm still kind of articulating how I want to ask this, but kind of something to do with like how we're like not made for a gym. Like how do you integrate like fitness and like going to the gym and stuff, but also like being with like nature and like using your body like in creation, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, to be healthy, you don't need to have a gym membership. Like that's not required. I will say there's like certain ways of working out that are going to be more effective when it comes to your physiology and your health and like the ramifications of that. So if somebody's like, I want to lose fat, there's going to be things that are more effective for that. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to work out a certain way. So yeah, for a lot of people, I just like to encourage them to find something that you're going to enjoy. As a coach, like one of the kind of principles that I go by is like give people a little bit of what they want so that you can give them more of what you know they need. So it's like I don't want to just tell you like you have to fit into my mold of working out because this is what I do. Like no, I know this is good for you, but I also know you still enjoy going for hikes. You enjoy rock climbing. You enjoy like hunting, whatever. Like hunting is a really exertive sport that I didn't realize until I got hunting clients, and they're like, train me for hunting. I'm like, what do you mean train you for hunting? Like you just stand there and shoot things. Like no, I like backpack across the state for like 3 days. I'm like, wow, okay, like yeah, let's do it. Or like military clients, I train a lot of like high level military people, and so like that's a totally different training style. So it really depends on what your stage is in life, but yeah, like how do you, integrate ourselves into what you're doing? I think just doing things that you're enjoying, that are giving you life, not things that are, taking your life away. So some people go to the gym and it's like they feel like they're a slave to it, and it's like a chore. And yeah, there's part of that that's like pushed through it, but it shouldn't feel like that necessarily when we're doing things that are good for our body. I don't know if that makes sense. So yeah, again, there's not like an easy answer necessarily. It's like, do this or that. But I will say again, there is certain ways still that are going to be more beneficial, especially for like clients who are aging. A certain resistance style, strength training is still going to be the most effective for your metabolic function, for like your bone density, for your hormone health, for like as you age, joint function. Like there's still things, that are going to be more effective. That doesn't mean that you still can't do other things you enjoy. Does that make sense? I don't know. We can talk about it more later, but maybe one more question if we have time, Father. Okay. Yeah.
I just had a question, sir. You mentioned that you kind of had an unhealthy relationship with competition.
Mm-hmm.
What did the healing journey look like to go back to having a healthy mindset for competition?
That is a good question. Yeah. So the question was you kind of got an unhealthy relationship towards competition. Like, how did you kind of reorder that, and how did you kind of heal that? It took a long time. It took you can ask my wife. Probably took 2-3 years. I was after my competition, like I said, I lost 60 pounds, and part of post-competition is what's called a reverse diet. You're supposed to kind of reverse out of what you did because your body is super, super sensitive to food. And so I gained 25 pounds in 2 days. Yeah, I'm not joking you. 25 pounds in 2 days. You could literally stand on the scale and just watch it go up probably. Because my body was so sensitive and so adapted to what I was doing, that when I started eating and just binging on food because I was starving for so long that I just so yeah, really unhealthy. Then I was kind of terrified of getting fat because I was I really like looking a certain way, and my idea of fat it was messed up in my mind anyways. So it took a long time. So I stayed at a really low level body fat for probably 2 or 3 years. And compared to average, people would say oh, you're still low level body fat. But for me, it was a really big mental thing. So it took a lot of prayer, a lot of just really digging deep into dude, why did you even get into this in the first place? Did you forget everything you learned when you started? So it was a lot of honest conversations with myself, talking to people. People who compete usually have just a twisted idea of what a good body looks like. Most people in the competition world, if I put 2 pictures next to each other, one where I was just more naturally bulky and one where I was super lean, competition people usually are oh yeah, you look better when you're super shredded. Normal people are you look better when you look normal and not you're in a concentration camp. And it kind of does look like that. It's pretty scary. 3.3 body fat percentage. For men, 3% is essential body fat, where your body starts shutting down. Women have higher. And so I would be talking and I would just be what was I talking about? And my brain just wasn't working. I wasn't sleeping. It was unhealthy. So it's a very unhealthy sport, which is ironic because a lot of those people are plastered all over as this is health. And you're you have to look like this to be healthy. It's no, that's actually unhealthy. That person has a lot of issues a lot of times. So the process of healing for me was just very organic. It's still ongoing. It's always ongoing. A lot of prayer, a lot of honest internal checking with myself, a lot of challenging conversations of hey, is this really good for you? Hey, why are you doing this? So having people to help kind of keep you accountable, but to really love you through that process. You really are impacted by the people around you. So especially girls or just the gym culture, whatever. It can be really toxic in those ways. So having good people who were just dude, I don't care what your body fat percentage is. I like you when you're more happy and not super moody and stuff like that. So I don't know. It's been a long process, but a lot of just internal work is kind of what it took. So yeah, thanks for all your questions.